Hey Eric, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good. Can you hear me all right?
I can. Yeah.
Excellent.
You hear me as
Um,
well?
yes, we are all good. Well, that was
Good.
probably the easiest and quickest connection we've had on in conversation for a while. We've had a few technical hiccups recently, so thank you for being on point there.
Sure.
Um, I literally just turned on and went straight live because I've just been at the ARLIS conference, which is a art librarians conference, which is in the UK. Really interesting stuff. But yeah, they were running about an hour behind, so
Yeah.
my little speech just right in the last few seconds, it was straight in line. Well, anyway, Eric, welcome to In Conversation, which is a weekly interview that I do with one of our authors, editors, or someone interesting from the academic or artistic community. It's a real pleasure to have you here. And, we're obviously doing a book together, and we're going to talk a bit about music. We're going to talk a bit about you, your research, how you got into academia, have a general catch up. Um, but also, one of the reasons that I have you on at the moment, a little bit early perhaps because your book isn't out yet, is because we've recently been celebrating Caribbean music and culture at Intellect, and it's an area that we've got some history, but it's an area that we're really kind of like trying to publish a lot of research in moving forward, and we're looking to publish a journal of sort of Caribbean music and culture. There's a few different names flying around, the Reggae Studies Journal being one of them. And of course, it was conversations I had with you at the Popular Culture Association conference many moons ago when we were all able to be in rooms together that got that conversation started. So I just want to start off again by thanking you for being here, but thank you also for all the introductions you've made for me and Intellect. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, and you're welcome. I look forward to either being a part or working on and reading the journal as it comes up, I'm
Definitely, and
excited
it'll be
about that.
no, definitely, and yeah, I'm just really excited that it's on the horizons for us, and hopefully we'll be moving forward with that in 2022. But first of all, then, Eric, where are you calling in from today?
I'm in Detroit, Michigan, in the U.S., in the city itself, the northern part of the city. But yeah, just from my house here. Yeah.
And is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, I'm originally from here, and then New Jersey, and then here, and then New York, and then here, but mostly here. Yeah.
So would you say that you've been, I mean, that there are three big music cities, definitely, and I know music's definitely a big passion for you in terms of scholarship, but also you play, right? You're an actual musician.
Yep, I tour and produce and do a whole bunch of stuff and have a record label myself that's more of a production company, kind of helping out and working with any labels that will distribute titles. But yeah, I produce here at home and with a lot of people all around the world in Jamaica and England and California and New York. And the one of the benefits I think of the pandemic was to connect a lot of people through technology, and that was, remote recording and being able to record in a house and send it to me, or I can record something here and send it to someone else. It's been really great. It's been a good thing.
That's good. Yeah, I was going to say, do you think, because obviously, do you think there's been many silver linings, as it were, for the music industry as a result of the pandemic? Because I think there have been in publishing and in academia, and I think you say like technology and widening access and democratizing access to culture and information is some of the big things for me. But how has the pandemic affected the music industry and maybe you personally?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because there's two sides of it, right? And when you say music industry, that's a big thing for me, right? Like the industry of music, I don't think it has changed very much from the pandemic. They're still trying to sell, they're still trying to monopolize and monetize everything possible, right? And there are still major players in the music industry and Spotify and all that kind of stuff. For more local or regionally or even internationally touring bands, it has been really beneficial to those connections, to be able to, especially as musicians, we can now, if you have the ability and the access with fairly inexpensive equipment, you can play or sing something in your home and send it to anybody. So you don't have to hire out a studio, or you don't have to go to a full professional studio to do these things. Now, that's positive and negative, because if you're a studio owner, you've lost some money because people aren't renting out by the hours or by the days. But it's positive because then musicians can get actually paid directly for the work that they're doing, as opposed to a producer hiring those musicians and then hiring out the studio time, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I guess that my big thing there is that the music industry has not really changed, because the money and the monetizing of everything and downloads and all the other kind of stuff that people are doing really didn't shift a lot. I would have hoped that it would, and I still have some hope that it may. Platforms like Bandcamp and TuneCore and these kind of things have made it more accessible for people to actually get paid, but you're still in that fight against majors and fight against, you know, major versus independent type levels.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've seen with a number of UK underground acts. Obviously, Intellect's based in Bristol in the UK, big music town. I'm personally based in Brooklyn, New York, again, a big music town. But yes, the underground scenes, I've noticed a number of people that I follow who, you know, are famous and certainly kind of lionized within the underground sector in various different genres. They've like completely pulled their music from Spotify and some of these other major, you know, streaming services, and are now solely selling things via Bandcamp, SoundCloud, or one of the other platforms. So yeah, I feel like the you know, although on an industry level it hasn't changed, I feel like individuals are now maybe just putting their head above the parapet and through the challenges that the pandemic has faced, they've kind of really kind of like pushing back against that systemic oppression that the industry kind of still is kind of forcing on people. Does that, yeah, have you experienced things like that? You see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me also, like touring musicians, that's where you make the money, right? Like you're on tour, you're selling merchandise and all that other stuff. And when touring stopped, that all of those streams were just gone. They're just disappeared. So, you know, the biggest example I have is, you know, from a New York band that I follow and are, you know, with the Slackers, they tour nonstop. And they were forced to kind of redesign everything during this pandemic about merch sales and Discogs and all these other kind of things, because that's their livelihood, you know, and they had to shift their livelihood. So was it beneficial to get them all into those worlds? Yeah, but, you know, also they lost significant funding by, you know, missing out on tours. And this goes for a lot of like upper mid-level, lower high-level artists, right, that have that consistent touring stream, that's what they did their whole life, you know. So now they had to reshift and kind of refocus those things, some in the positive, some in the negative. I know some bands broke up completely because of this. Some bands have, you know, reformed, and, you know, so it's, yeah. And it goes through all genres, I think. I mean, even just a DJ, a house DJ, that is used to performing in clubs, right, is going to be, you know, had to reinvent themselves basically and do, you know, Twitch streams or something else that actually generated something.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, like, because I want to talk to you a bit about performance in the pandemic and just performance in general. But very quickly, it was interesting the way that people adapted, and then we were using Instagram for this conversation, and it has been very, you know, had a profound impact of the pandemic, I think, on music, in the sense that, you know, it was the first real conduit for like things like, you know, DJ D Nice and a bunch of like old school DJs who maybe, you know, many younger listeners weren't familiar with, you know, became from the 80s hip hop scene or from the 80s electronic dance music scenes. And they've been doing these live streams, and like now it's like their careers have either been completely rejuvenated, or they were just doing something really cool and supporting interesting music throughout the pandemic. And then of course you've got like the Versus phenomena. I don't know if you've watched any of those.
Yeah. Yeah, the Beanie Man one was amazing. Yep.
That was the first one.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah, because I was reading the other day, we had Sonia Stanley Near on here in conversation a few weeks back while we began the celebration of Caribbean music and culture, and we were talking a bit about Beanie Man and various other people. But yeah, that was the biggest one so far. I think it was the first, but it had the biggest impact. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting when you think. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if all those streams are coming from Jamaica and the Caribbean, or whether it was truly kind of global, because they've gone up against some really big names and big acts, with, you know, Snoop Dogg versus DMX and, you know, Bobby Brown and all these other characters. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd kind of like to see that diversify, and kind of I'd like to see some people from maybe more of a punk background, or
Yeah,
you
that'd
know,
be
like
interesting.
hardcore bands and things like that go head to
Yeah.
head as well. Yeah, I mean, the good thing with people like Timberland and oh crikey, I forget his name now. But the guys who were responsible for the verses, they were really good at getting the sponsorship in as well, I think,
Yeah.
and I think hip hop lends itself to that. Hip hop and R&B lends
And
itself.
that, I mean, that also is an example, right, of what we were just talking about. Like that has industry backing, right?
Yeah,
Like that has a lot of industry backing that was really effective. You know, the local person doing that or the underground bands doing that, yeah, it would be great, like punk verse or hardcore or whatever, right? But it's not going to have the same reach, right? And then another example of like just live streaming stuff is the Barris Hammond concert from Jamaica that had, I mean, millions of views. It was amazing. And the concert live was, it was done well. It was professional. It had, you know, Popcorn and all these guest artists on that show on a great stage, and the sound was great. And, you know, it was an amazing concert that most people would not have been able to see, right? Like we're not in Jamaica, or if, you know, and I think that was a huge benefit. I would have never been able to see Barris Hammond like that unless I'm in Jamaica, right? Like, you know, so that I think is one of the benefits, but also that had huge industry and government support, you know?
yeah. I mean, we're going to definitely get into Jamaica in a second, and I guess that's something you definitely see in Jamaica across culture. It's like kind of often the government backing, or I suppose, yeah, you kind of see more of a cultural backing, I think, from kind of the powers that be, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see things like that happen, like that concert. It'd be interesting. Have you watched many other concerts, and do you think we're going to start to see more of these virtual events taking place? I mean, I know for example, for the last few years, like the New York Opera Houses, you know, they've been streaming live across the world. So it's not like the technology wasn't there, but it was kind of, you know, slightly rarefied and looking through cinemas and things like that. But do you think we will, you know, go have more of a hybrid format, a bit like we're seeing with academic conferences, where you will be able to virtually, you know, log into a gig as well, and especially for these bigger events?
For sure. I think what's really changed is the user experience, right? The end user is the one that has now become comfortable with this. So you and I can do this like this on Instagram very, very easily. That was not the case before with the, you know, the opera streamings or any other kind of streamings. So I do think that, yeah, I think it's going to become a huge element of live performance and live production that you're going to have to be streaming as well, right? Or and it can go, I've also seen it the opposite, that like secret shows get announced right away and, you know, they fill up because they're not going to be streamed.
Yeah.
Right. So there's both sides of it, I think, are going to continue. Yeah.
Of course, you are an academic as well as a musician. So I was just wondering, what do you teach? What's your kind of main subjects that you focus on?
I'm an English teacher. I teach literature and composition, but literature is my main focus. I'm a postmodern dramatist, basically. Beckett and Theater of the Absurd and that kind of stuff is where I am at. But I also, my composition classes are all about writing about music. Cool. And writing about pop culture. So we're writing about, you know, what's going on around the world and all the other kind of stuff in music formats, genres, and argumentative theory there. But my focus and my research is what the book is coming out of is media studies and cultural theory, where I was doing my dissertation in media studies. It was in English, but with a concentration in media studies. So I could focus on dub and production techniques and the like.
Very cool. And for you, is teaching a big part of why you enjoy academia, or are you more focused on the research and the writing and the presenting?
I enjoy both. The reason that I am at a community college is because I like to teach. I had a teaching certification for secondary education, like 8th grade through high school. For a while, it's lapsed now. When I got tenure at the college, I just didn't renew it. But I enjoy teaching. I just got done teaching a class earlier today. in World Lit. It was the, you know, we were talking about Heart of Darkness and that kind of stuff. So, you know, like I enjoy teaching, and for me, it's become part of the, you know, performative aspect of my life. Like I love being on stage, and this teaching is another opportunity for that. And I like to talk about books and music, right? Like those are the two things for me. So the research angle, I love too. And what the benefit of being at a non-research institution is that I am one of the few people at the institution that research, so I can, the funding and that kind of stuff is all a little bit easier to, you know, apply for and all this other kind of stuff. So I love going to conferences, and I like talking about the things that I study about and do.
And what was your personal journey into academia? Did you start off as a musician, or did you just go straight through college, high school, and then become an academic, or did you have any?
How long do you have? How long do we have here?
Sweet.
Just the quick version, right? No, I have a really backwards kind of thing. My undergraduate studies, I was playing music and performing and just kind of doing undergraduate work to get out of college and just be done with it. And I looked and I went, well, I like psychology. Oh, and I got a lot of English credits, so I'll take both. And so I got out of undergrad, went into the quote unquote real world, trying to make it as a musician, and wound up bartending my whole career. And then I finally kind of came, you know, into, you know what, I always liked English. I want to go back to school for that. So I put myself through a master's program in English. I was on academic probation for my master's program because my undergraduate grades were so bad. So I was really lucky to get into that master's program, but it did not have a capstone, like it didn't continue on to a PhD. So it was just a master's program. So when I got out of that, I started looking for teaching jobs, like part-time and adjunct positions and that. And luckily I presented at a conference, and someone at St. John's in New York, in Queens, said, hey, you know, if you're ever out in New York, look us up. We need teachers. So I said, well, I've always wanted to move back to New York. So moved back to New York, got a job there, and started my kind of academic teaching. Then I went into looking at, because of like I was adjunct, I wanted to be full-time. You have to have a PhD at those institutions. So I went looking for that. Did not, at that time I was working on my first book, and writing that, which came out of conference presentations and the like, and wound up moving back to Michigan here and getting a job teaching at my alma mater part-time, but then a full-time literature professor retired at this community college, and I applied and got the job there. Once I was there, I've been there for, I think this is the end of my 16th year there. Once I got to Oakland Community College, I dove into teaching and getting into the teaching side of academia, and was still kind of researching and going to conferences here and there and that kind of thing. And eventually my youngest children got old enough, and I said, I've always wanted a PhD. So I went and applied, and got it done at Wayne State here in Detroit, and got in. And I just finished my dissertation and graduated in 2018. So, you know, for me, it was a huge, long journey, you know, about 20 something years in academia to get that PhD. But it was all worth it. And my weird way of doing it somehow worked out, you know.
Well, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And it's a great story. And I was just wondering as well, like with that in mind, and because you've taken kind of like maybe not the pathway that many academics and scholars do, would you have any advice for early career academics or people who are kind of like looking to get into academia? Any top tips?
The top tip is if you're going to do a master's program, get into a program that has a PhD continuation. Then you have the opportunity and the option to either stop with a master's or continue on. And that was one of the biggest things, because it was extremely difficult for me to get into a program after I already had a master's, because they want to use you as a teacher. you know, and they want you to have that experience. So yeah, don't give up, and, you know, keep going. You know, like for me, like what I tell some of my students, but actually everybody, like, if you're doing what you love, it's not work, right? Like it's work, but it's hard work. But I always, in my PhD program, I concentrated on dub music and cultural studies and theory, and did the things I really loved. And I told my professors that in media say, well, in a film class, I'm like, I'm not going to write on this film. I'm going to write on The Harder They Come. And they're like, okay, you know? And so that kind of stuff, like, once you get into that mindset of dealing with, you know, academia and like all this big stuff, and once you get through your initial theory classes that everybody has to take, you can create, you know, you can create what you want and kind of shape it to your own research desires.
And I mean, obviously, I'm going to jump around a lot, and if anyone in the audience has any questions for Eric or myself, we are happy to take them. So just put them in the comment section, and we'll get round to them. We're going to be talking about Eric's forthcoming book with Intellect, which focuses on dub and dub records, and we will be going into that in a bit. We're going to talk a bit about Jamaica and a few other things, but you're from Detroit, and Detroit is hugely famous as, you know, a mainstay for music, you know, Motown, formation of electronic dance music. How has that influenced you growing up in the city? Is that where you think your love of music came from, or was there a lot of music played in your house?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of music in my house. My father still is playing baritone sax and, cool, you know, orchestra or big band stuff. But no, I think, you know, that Detroit itself, you know, has a really big history of music, and, you know, especially underground music. And once I found that out, the punk and hardcore scenes, and then finally found ska and got into, you know, some more Caribbean music that way, that was hugely influential.
Cool. And you found dub and Jamaican music through sort of hardcore and punk. Is that right?
I found ska, right, because I'm a trumpet player first, or piano player and then trumpet player, and I was in marching band and did all that other kind of stuff, and somebody finally threw a Selector record on, and I was like, what is this? This is amazing. And it had no horns in it, right? It's a Selector, and it's still one of my favorite bands of all time is the Selector. But you know, as soon as I heard that, I immediately like dove into it and got into. I was like, wait, what is first wave? There weren't any names yet. There wasn't like a first or second wave or anything like that. It was two-tone or, you know, traditional basically. And then I found the Scotalites, and that opened up everything. And I was lucky enough to open for the Scotalites about 6 times. When they came through here with various bands I've been in, and meet them personally, and, you know, it's their amazing influence even in their incarnation now, and the different changes they've gone through and all of that. But you know, once I figured out that you could play jazz in a, you know, upbeat kind of Jamaican form, I was blown away, right? And that was it. That did it for me. I think I was 13.
Awesome, and fair play for that. That's a big support act. I'm a fan of Selector as well, and I do like a lot of ska and two-tone, but mainly through my mum and dad. They both worked in music when I was growing up, and it was at that period in the late 70s and the early 80s, and they put on a lot of these like double headers, you know, and like I always remember, the Selector and a bunch, I think it was a triple header. I can't even remember who the other bands were, but they were all massive at the time, and I've just been very young and it's been very formative, so I've always been into it. You mentioned there a little bit about like what the sort of the musicology, I suppose. For anyone who doesn't really know what ska is, can you just explain, you know, what makes it so special musically, or why it's unique?
Okay, it's a long. There's a lot of stuff on that. But the biggest thing is in, you know, the upbeat rhythm. So instead of the downbeat, it's on the upbeat. And then there's lots of argument and kind of discussion all around the world about what makes ska. But for me, it's the drum patterns and the kind of upbeat in the guitar and the piano. And for myself, particularly in the book too, one of the things that I advocate is that those two instruments in most Jamaican music, I would kind of argue, they become rhythm instruments instead of lead instruments mostly. And when the piano and the guitar are kind of playing together with the drum and the bass, that's what makes kind of this driven ska format. It doesn't have to have horns. It doesn't have, I mean, there are very, very different arguments out there. There's all kinds of stuff on the internet now about what ska is. I think Ska-Lites, kind of the jazz format coming out of Alpha Boys School, and that training led to a huge development in what defines ska. And then it shifted once it got to England, and came over here in America in the 80s and all of that.
Well, before we move on, are there any other bands other than the Selector and the other ones you've mentioned that people should check out if they want to get a real kind of like feel for the music?
Oh, jeez. Feel for ska?
Yeah.
There's lots. I mean, there's lots.
Well,
I mean, the whole two-tone catalog is, recommended. English Beat Specials. Ska-Lites are up in the traditional wave. Byron and Lee and the Dragonaires is another real traditional band. Delroy Wilson is a favorite of mine. Desmond Decker. These are all singers also that I would check out. Peter Tosh and, the Wailers and all of these, kind of things that are more, I guess, mainstream or have made it popular into the popular pantheon in music also are really, that's a big thing. Two-tone definitely paved the way, for the American resurgence too. And you have bands like the Toasters, the Slackers is what Bim Scala Bim is another one. I can keep going if you want. There's tons and tons and tons.
Cool. I just always like to ask people to like share some of their favorites or like their top tips, because we often be talking about these things that many people who listen to this might not be that familiar with. So it's always nice that they can go afterwards and check a few things out. So thanks for sharing.
Oh, sure.
It's cool. And again, it's nice to sort of see kind of the musical lineage that leads into dub. Speaking of which, let's have a bit of a chat about the book. So first of all, what's the title?
The title of this one is Distillation of Sound, Dub and the Creation of Culture.
And tell us a little bit about the project. Like, what are you what's the kind of the aim and the scope? What makes the book stand out?
For me, for this project, I was reading and doing a lot of research the last I think this is about a 6 or 7 year process till now, of actually researching this pretty heavily. But I was looking at the kind of music that actually resonates when you're on your own or on, within a specific set area. So not just like a show. So some of this crosses over to sound system culture as well. But particularly with dub music, that kind of music that just gets into you somehow, right? And so I was studying affect theory as well. And that's one of my backgrounds that is with media studies. And I was kind of realizing that the music that does this is really bass driven. And it kind of crosses over to techno and, dubstep and all of this kind of stuff too, theoretically. But the dub for me, because of the ska influence and everything, was always something I went to on a long drive home, while studying, while just trying to get out of my head basically and into my head at the same time. And it had always been this kind of presence in my world, and I wanted to really study it a lot. So I started doing that. And then I read a whole bunch of stuff by like David Katz and Julian Enriquez and a whole bunch of other people that had done this research before me. And I was like, okay, what I want to do then is take these full-length records, right, that were claiming to be the first ones, and figure out, why they made them for full-length, what's different between this kind of full-length record conception and a single, like a 45, and try to differentiate between these two. Are these like producer records? Are they engineer records? And the like. So that all kind of turned into the book. And the book's focus is really how the sound of dub allowed this culture to be created throughout the world, right? And there are some other books that have done some good, extensive research about this, but none that I found during my research that are talking specifically about full-length records as opposed in depth. and looking at what, you know, specifically the engineers are doing or the producers are doing within each track. There's really great, Enrique's book on affect of sound is amazing, on Jamaican sound system culture and the way that it affects our body. And that was one of the kind of key books for me to go, oh yeah, okay, I'm on the right path.
What are there any other books that have kind of influenced the work, or any other kind of theorists or thinkers that, you know, you draw upon?
Sure. I mean, okay, so David Katz's work with Lee Perry and all the books that he's written, doing direct interviews, the stuff that he writes about Japan, dub in Japan, and like there's little articles that he has done all over the place. It was really influential to me. Also the book the title's Dub, and I can't remember the author. It's right behind me on my shelf here. And it was one of the first ones. I have to just spin around here for a second and figure it out. Oh, no. But anyway, but bass culture also was a really big one for me. That is really like the more interview structured throughout the thing. Marvin Sterling's book on dub in Japan, or hip hop, Japan and reggae, basically, was a really good Japanese or work on book on Japanese crossing over with the dub culture. Let's see, theoretically, I mean, I'm really kind of indebted. You know, I started the time that I was in school, like Foucault and all of those guys were the big ones, right? Like, so that was my kind of Foucault and Jameson and the like were all really big players. Yeah. And then, you know, Deleuze and all of those theoretically.
Interesting. How does some of those theories sort of bear on your work? Is there anything that's, you know, how do you apply them, or do you, or is it just more kind of sort of influence the genesis of your thinking by reading all that stuff, that sort of postmodernism? Mm-hmm.
For this book, not so much as the first two that I wrote on. My first book on garage rock is all based in Jameson theory and Foucault and all of that kind of stuff. This one is more influenced by that, and mostly influenced by affect theory, and talking about you know, Baudrillard's kind of stuff and post Baudrillard stuff, and looking at how right, like that time between, right, feeling and emotion is called affect, right? Or, you know, like the time between where you put your hand down on the stove and you say ow, right? Like, so that in between those two periods, those two things, right, for me, that's what I was interested in. That's where a lot of my kind of thought process went. And as soon as I kind of did that, all this stuff clicked with music and kind of related to me theoretically. I was like, oh yeah, this is it.
Oh, very cool. Well, I can see someone's a teacher. Thanks for explaining that in language. I was like, I was trying to drag back through my Baudrillardian studies from many moons ago. So no, it's always interesting, because I think when I was writing on hip hop when I was doing my master's degree, and the mythologies of hip hop. But one of my mistakes was I almost tried to apply too much theory, or the theory had too much of an impact on the scholarship, and I got a little bit away from the purity of the music and of the culture. You know, I still got my distinction, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah,
but,
there you go. Yeah.
It was definitely. I always find it interesting how people can apply, especially these very sort of kind of obscure and obtuse theories. So thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, I'm again blanking. That book is dubbed Soundscapes and Shattered Sounds, and I'm dropped the author's name. But he's an anthropologist or cultural anthropologist that was very effective. That was a huge turning point for me too.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, I was going to say, I wanted to talk a little bit about Jamaica as well, and just the Caribbean.
Yeah. Real quick, sorry, it's Michael Veal.
Thank you.
Michael Veal's book, dubbed Soundscapes and Shattered Songs.
Smooth.
Jamaican reggae. If you haven't read that, everybody should read that. It's an amazing book on this work.
Okay, well, thanks for that top tip. No, that's good to know. So yeah, we've had a few people on recently talking about Caribbean music and culture, and to kick us off, we had Dr. Sonia Stanley Nia, who's based out in Kingston, Jamaica, and I know you know her and her work well. She was great. Everyone go back and check that interview out; it was really fun. But she enlightened me on a lot of things I wasn't aware of about Jamaican music or Caribbean music in general. She mainly focused on dancehall, which is again something that she's a real expert on and still definitely practices as well. But she discussed the rich tapestry of music in Jamaica. She discussed all these different genres. I can't remember if she said 8 or 9, but have come out of Jamaica, from Afrobeat through to sort of reggae, dancehall, dub, all these different things, and some others that I'd never even heard of. So it was very illuminating. But we were getting into why is Jamaica such kind of like a birthplace for all these different musics? It's had such an impact globally. Have you been to Jamaica, and what are the reasons behind that, do you think?
Yeah, yes, I have been into Jamaica. I presented at the Reggae Studies unit at University of West Indies and met Dr. Nia and a whole bunch of other people, Carolyn Cooper, and all these people. I also was able, luckily through that, to meet Gussie Clark, who owns Anchor Recording Studios, and I actually recorded an EP there. So that's an amazing experience. I can't really speak to I'm not Jamaican, so I can't speak to what makes Jamaica, distinct in creating these culture or music cultures. What I can say is that somewhat it feels similar to something like in Detroit, where you're in a pretty working class area. There's not a lot of options to do or to get things, so you make do with what you have here, right? Yes. And in some of the interviews with Dr. Stanley Nia that I had with her, that was one big theme that she was mentioning, is that Jamaicans make do with what they have around them. And I think that's a huge deal in Detroit also. I think that's where Motown comes from. I think that's where a whole bunch of different things, the soul and some of the other, the punk and the underground stuff here really kind of culminates that focus of, yeah, this is what we have around us. We can't do anything else. So let's make the best out of what we have. And if people like it, they like it. And I also think that particularly to Jamaica, again, I didn't grow up there, so I don't have that experience, but I do, through research and looking at it and visiting, I think there's a huge thing about what is Jamaican and then what is going out of Jamaica, right? And I think there's a big distinction if you actually visit Jamaica and go to Kingston and go to the dance halls and go to these parties and events that are all night long. The music there is very different than what we consider, what it is or what we think it is right now. And not in a bad or a good way. It's just different. It's distinctly kind of a Jamaican experience. And I think that if you came to Detroit, you're not going to be able to have the experience anywhere else of driving by busted down automotive plants, right? You can see one of them in different places in different areas of the world, but to drive right through a community where the building's still there and it's completely gutted, and that's a pure kind of Detroit experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, interesting. Well, I've got a few questions that have come just from what you've been saying there. First and foremost, while we're still talking about Jamaica, what were some of your kind of highlights of being there yourself? You sounds like you visited some of the dance halls. What did you most enjoy about being in the country and in Kingston?
I think, okay, so there's different distinctions, right? I was staying in Kingston, but also traveled to North Coast and some other places. Kingston is very much, when I visited it, it felt like Detroit to me. It's very it's kind of industrial city that has been kind of left, and now it's starting to maybe come back, maybe not. There's talk about the new cruise ship dock there and all this other kind of stuff. For me, the highlight is the dance halls and the music there. It was amazing. The fact that you can go to Stone Love, which is they have their own setup for a dance hall, so it's more like our traditional going to the bar. Or you can go to something like Uptown Mondays or Mojito Mondays, depending on what it's called, which is literally a parking lot of a strip mall, walled off, and everybody's just hanging out with huge speakers till 4 or 5 in the morning. Right. And this happens every day of the week. This is not like, it's a Monday, and every day of the week they start from midnight at the earliest, and it just runs all night long. And that's an amazing thing to witness as a musician and as a person that studies and just loves music. Like, just to see that is amazing. But then you get into all the other kind of things. I had an amazing time going and touring Alpha Boys School and learning about where, the Scotalites came, and seeing these original instruments and all of these things, and learning that it's, essentially a boys' school, right? Like, it's run by nuns that, they're strict, and it's to get people off the street, and they gave them they gave them instruments and taught them how to play. And they're still doing that. They just got a huge grant and redid a recording studio there. So they have an up-to-date kind of modern contemporary recording studio for their students. That, and then, going to, those were really big highlights for me. And I visited Soundsystem yard, Tony Myers' yard, where he has been building sound systems for decades now. And seeing that process and seeing that kind of thing come to fruition was amazing as well. Yeah.
Awesome. That leads me to my next question, actually, or a couple of questions. So for anyone who doesn't really know, a sound system is basically a sound system. So it's a bunch of speakers, but that are kind of like built, like manufactured normally by like a craftsman or independent sort of company or something. And then it's kind of build up these massive sound systems so then you can have a big party, in a parking lot or something like that. Is that kind of basically, for the layman, what a sound system is?
Yeah. I would say, and all the issues that come with it, right? Noise problems and all the other kind of things that, but the sound system itself is just a bunch of stacks of speakers. Yeah.
It's interesting because I've never been to Jamaica, but I am hoping to go in early next year for the conference, which I assume you'll probably be heading out to as well. And we can give that another plug in a minute. But like Intellect's headquarters in Bristol in the UK, which is a city in the United Kingdom with a large population of people who have a Caribbean ancestry. So that sound system culture is something I'm kind of familiar with, and I've always loved that about Bristol. You're in a rural, southwesterly community, it's a fairly small city, but then because of the influence of the Caribbean on the city, you've got this amazing sort of like culture, especially around music and sound systems, and there's the carnival and things like that. But you have also alluded to a lot of the similarities between, say, Detroit and Kingston. And I was wondering, is there much of a sound system culture in Detroit where you grew up? And is that something that you used to kind of be a part of? Or is that something that's happening? Because it sounds like it's a city that could really almost benefit from that, and they could probably get away with it with all these derelict buildings and warehouses, because that's how it started in Bristol.
There is here, and it is not as widespread as in Bristol or in the UK anywhere, and all these big gigantic things. I actually built a sound system myself. So I run one now, but it's a smaller one, but and going and doing farmers markets and kind of things in the park and, those kind of things. But, the rave culture and the techno culture here really was so huge that it really dominated and cut a lot of that out. Not out, like it wasn't here before, but, it was here before. I don't even want to say that. There's a fairly substantial Caribbean and Jamaican population here that has sound system culture. You just have to find it, and it's something that I think there could be a lot more of. Right, I think there could be a lot more shows here. There could be, but there are Mr. Vegas is coming to a restaurant here. I think in a couple weeks. And those are big things. We had Atana here too, on her tour for when she got nominated for that Grammy pre-pandemic, and that we get some larger artists here that come through, but then they wind up in like not lower level, but not in the clubs that I think they should need to be in. They're either underground clubs or they're in restaurants or something like that. When the performance spaces, like, I really would like to see that culture even further develop more here. Whether I'm a part of it or not, I just want to be kind of a watcher and a participant, as well.
Well, well, actually, no. While we're still talking about Detroit, you've highlighted the electronic dance music scene there as well. Is that still popping off there? Because I mean, I guess that's kind of where sort of I suppose like techno. Was it techno came from there, and like house? It's
House,
there.
yeah.
There in Chicago, right? Kind of like the two big cities where.
Yeah, we'll claim it here.
Yeah, I guess it.
Yeah.
Like the Polish and the Russians with vodka, right? It's,
yep. Yep. We'll claim it. I'm gonna claim Kevin Saunderson and Derek May and those guys. They're from here. They started it, and I was never a big part of that scene, but I knew what was going on. And the Electronic Music Festival is still the biggest festival that happens every year in Detroit in the world, I think. For that, it was canceled last year, of course, but I believe it's coming. It might be back this year. It might not be this year. Maybe next year. But yeah, it's still a huge thing here.
Cool. One of the things I really like, especially maybe being like a hip hop fan, because and having written about it from a scholarly perspective as well, and of course Intellect, we published the Journal of Global Hip Hop Studies, which has led us to move into this idea of publishing a journal that focuses on reggae and on Caribbean music and culture, because of course hip hop. The origin story is that it came to New York via a DJ called Herc and his Soundsystem. And it's interesting because they used to talking about like being in derelict buildings and things. They used to plug into the light poles and create these big street parties, and then have these battles. Rather than killing each other or fighting and things, it became a battle through music, dance, through graffiti, through these other things, and then of course all these other elements came from it. But long story short, but I love the way that music kind of like transfers with people, and that I think is one of the key things. Again, I'm not from Jamaica, so I can't say why all these different music genres came in this, in this one place. But being from England, I can see the influence, and then now living in New York, I can see the influence on these other genres. And I suppose it's the same with EDM in Detroit. But I know that you've written on this as well, and I was thinking specifically more about the influence of Jamaican music in England, especially from the 50s, but especially through the 70s. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the research that you undertook on that, and what you kind of found, and what you find interesting about that.
Sure. I'll go back to what you said. It is about the people. It's about the people, the diaspora, where people are moving to, why they're moving to places. I mean, the Windrush generation and the children of the Windrush generation, and the like. It's also about the people investing in those cultures and investing and saying, this is what I really like. If you asked me to talk about England, I was lucky enough to interview Adrian Sherwood and Dennis Bovell too. Both of those gentlemen who were huge parts of, and still are huge parts of, Dennis Bovell is the Lovers Rock, right, producer and musician, and did so much huge work on dub culture in England. And the Cimarrons being one of the first reggae groups there. Doing research on that stuff and seeing that it's very much like the people went there for work, and then they developed a culture around because they're there and they see some similar people around. But then what happens, particularly in England, but also when it comes to America and New York and other places, but it takes somebody else investing in that, right? And a label or somebody with connections. I talked to Mad Professor also about this, and these kind of conversations. All of the conversations came kind of to the same point, that somebody at some point invested in them, right? Or they had a good job as an electronics engineer that allowed them to get some parts or some things that they could make themselves and carry the same kind of system forward. And particularly the research that I was doing was really focused on that stuff, right? And that kind of thing, that like, what did he use or what did they use to get, you know, this sound, right? And when you look at, you know, people like Adrian Sherwood and Tapazuki and some of these people that are in England that were kind of around in the beginning of that in the late 70s or mid 70s and early 80s, right? That's a big kind of focus for it. Like there were their house parties. Again, I was not in England in the 70s and 80s, so I didn't get to experience this. I wish I did. Like, but you know, that kind of the community focus first, and then it branching out into this, and then the support of those communities for carnival and like street parties and this kind of stuff, and then the support of the government for those kind of, you know, getting grants and this stuff. I think that that goes throughout music history and how it distilled a lot. That's a whole nother book just about the government. I mean, it still amazes me in the collection that I put together on hardcore punk and other junk. There's a person that wrote about Throbbing Gristle in a chapter on that. It amazes me that all of their work was an art project that was sponsored by the government.
Really interesting. Okay.
Like, so they had government funds to go on stage and do what they did. If you don't know what they did, go Google them. You know,
yeah,
like, and you know, like, but the point is like that's something that's really kind of important in this development, that the community comes together first, and then there's some, either a member of the community is on a community board or something like that, that can get funds and apply for grants funds or whatever in whatever country they're called, right, to expand it. And as soon as that happens, then it becomes like outsiders come into it, and then you get into this outsider insider status and all of that kind of conversation, for positive and negative ways. And you get either what happened to Notting Hill Carnival, or, you know, like what continues to happen locally.
Yeah. Well, thanks for speaking on that for a minute, because as I say, you know, Intellect's from Bristol in England, and although we're profoundly international, and you and I met in a random hotel in City at a random conference in the US, but we still have, you know, we work with a lot of people from Bristol, and I just always think it's interesting to talk about how things link back, you know, especially when we talk about things like this. So thank you very much for explaining that. We've got about 8 minutes left, so I've got a few questions I'm going to shoot about, but I just want to say to the audience, thanks again for joining in. But if you do have any questions, drop them in the comments. If you have any specific questions for Eric on dub or on Jamaican music or on any of these other things we've been discussing, please do drop them in the comment section, and we'll try and get to them. But otherwise, I'm going to ask you, I think I'm just going to ask you a few sort of random questions. Let me see what I've got here. I was going to say, yeah. So you tell us a bit about some of the bands that you're in. You still play? Do you still play out?
Yeah. We're getting ramped up for a big festival in September. Got little local shows here, but I've been rehearsing. Rehearsals are kicked back. I play with a band called Jay Navarro and the Traders, which is a ska band. I also play with a big band, kind of like Scotalites cover band, called Killer Diller. And then a more like dub and dance hall-y reggae centered group called Detroit Rhythm Crew. And that's kind of like my producer angle, where I'm mixing and working with other people all over the place. I run a company called Abbey Productions. You can Bandcamp, abbeyproductions.bandcamp.com. You can see all those things, and youtube.com and /Abbey Productions will get you there too.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. I was also going to ask, I've got a million in my head, but I'm going to just drop you. You're always very sharp. I noticed that, Eric, and you definitely kind of inhabit the style of ska and two-tone and that sort of. So is that an important part of the culture, do you think? Like, I mean, going back to Jamaica with the Clarks, and you know, I know you wear a lot of Fred Perry, and I've seen you in a pork pie hat once or twice. Is that an important part of the culture, and is it an important part of it for you?
For me, it is. I mean, I don't make any kind of judgment or distinction, you know, with others. Like, but I enjoy it. Like, I enjoy that part of the culture. I think it's gotten way too expensive, of course, for everything. But you know, yeah, I you know, this is part of my teaching style. Also, like, this is where, you know, when I go to dress up, it's in a Ben Sherman or a Fred Perry, or, you know, like, that's what I do. And when I'm on stage, I'm usually in a suit and, you know, that kind of stuff. So that's it. Yeah, I think it's an important part. It's not the end all be all, but it is. I enjoy it. You know?
Where do you think? I mean, I'm kind of thinking more about ska here, but where do you think the white and black two-tone, the suit, the hat, where did that sort of sharp style come from? Is there
Well, I
lineage?
mean that comes from the Jamaican rude boys, right? And then transfers into, you know, with Neville Staple and the specials kind of, and then running, right, the turning two-tone into what it became. I did read once that two-tone was actually about what like the police vehicles in England looked like at the time, and that's what they were trying to do. But then it turned into this kind of like cultural representation of black and white coming together. So I think both are fine. That's great. But the style of, you know, looking sharp and looking, you know, doing your best to go out to a party, you know, that all comes from Jamaican society and the rude boys and that kind of thing, and transfers over to, you know, mod culture in England and, you know, skinhead fashion and all of these kind of things that come out of that rebellion against, I guess, hippiedom and rockers and all of that. Yeah.
I think it's
to
fascinating.
America, that changes also.
So say that again.
When it gets to America, that changes also. But
Yeah, and I mean, being my age, I'm 37, so there was the ska punk and the kind of like era that I grew up in, and that had a distinctive style too. Were you ever into any of that stuff, or this
oh yeah,
band?
I mean the first band I mentioned, we are technically, I guess, kind of ska punk, but more two-tony. But we get labeled all that kind of stuff a lot. I played in bands in the 90s that were, you know, I guess the third wave of ska, but not so much along Real Big Fish lines, but, you know, close to, like, Mustard Plug is from Michigan here, which is a bigger band in that genre.
You're reminding me of a fateful night when I was about maybe 21, 22, and it was Real Big Fish, The Bouncing Souls, and Less Than Jake, triple header.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked unloading the trucks and got a free ticket, and it was quite a pit, and it was pretty sensational show.
And the Jay Navarro of Jay Navarro and the Traders is the lead singer from the Suicide Machines.
Oh,
so
okay.
They're still playing, and they're still, you know, so that comes in. Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, I'm going to just fire a few questions at you. So, in terms of music, who are your favorite kind of artists? Do you have any standout, any genre? Who do you really love?
Of any genre? Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite people. I am all over the place, really. But I mean, the Scotalites I always come back to whenever I need to listen to something. I'm a huge Miles Davis fan. I have everything by him, but that's from my trumpet playing days, and you know, like, got influenced by that. I really love The Business from the punk side of things. I really enjoy like dub, you know, Augustus Pablo, Lee Perry, you know, Mad Professor. All of the Scientists is another one that I was lucky enough to interview, and like these are all idols of mine, right? Adrian Sherwood, all of these people were like I'm still baffled by the fact that they actually picked up the phone for me, you know, like that, like it's really like it. You know, someone's saying in the comments, it's like I'm back when I was 16, like that. Like that's for me, that was what I'm talking to these people that were like my heroes right back then. And Dennis Bavell and all of these people that, you know, I really like bands that are also a little bit, you know, underground too. You know, like I enjoy all kinds of stuff that way.
Have you, well, first of all, I was going to say, with Miles Davis, do you prefer Kind of Blue or do you prefer Sketches of Spain?
I'm always kind of blue person, but I mean, Bitches Brew is like the epitome of production, and Teo Marcio is production on that, and all these things. That's a whole nother 3-hour conversation if you want to get into Miles. I have like box sets of like just that I listen to the studio banter, you know, and that's amazing to me. But yeah, and read all the biographies and autobiographies, and yeah, Miles is a big big
Well,
deal.
did you see the film? I think it was Don Cheadle, right,
Yeah,
who played him.
yeah.
What did you make of that? Did you think?
I enjoyed it. I thought as a document or as a film, it was really good. I like to read the official biography and then the autobiography. Those, if you read them together, they have the same stories throughout them. One from Miles's standpoint and one from biographers, and it's amazing. So I'd recommend that. They're funny. It's great.
And then, and while we're still talking about Miles as well, are you familiar with Betty Davis?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't until recently, and I watched this TV show, which is brilliant. It's Mike Judd did it. It's called Tales from the Tour Bus. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I have not seen it. I am familiar, but yeah.
I mean, anyone out there, I'd very much urge them to watch it. This was like the first thing I came across in the pandemic, and it blew my mind. It's very funny. So Mike Judd, for anyone who doesn't know, he did Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill and all that kind of stuff. So he's an animator, but he does this documentary where he interviews all the surviving people from. He did 2 seasons, one on funk and one on country, and it's the usual suspects, but then there's also peripheral characters, and one of them he interviews is Betty Davis, and it's just very interesting, the relationship that she had with Miles, her husband for the time, and just as a female performer, just able to do this crazy, highly sexualized, really innovative and interesting music, and Mike Judd does a very good job of animating the whole thing, plus animating the interviews, and then animating the anecdotes, and it's hilarious, but also you can just tell that like he knows so much and has so much love for these different genres, and it really opens your mind. You get like Bootsy Collins on there. We'll be talking about one time when they accidentally spiked James Brown with acid because it was, he wanted to drink their soda, and they're like, no, you don't want to have this, James, and he's like, I'm the goddamn James Brown. I'll have this soda, but it was of course spiked with tangerine sunshine or something along those lines. So highly recommend that. And it was my first foray into the music of Betty Davis and her relationship with Miles. But I have digressed somewhat.
Oh
here.
yeah.
I mean, when you start talking about music, it's so easy to go off into different tangents, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are there any other genres that you listen to regularly? It sounds like you've got a fairly broad range. Is there anything that people...
It's been mostly Caribbean, music for me for a long time. But I mean, punk and hardcore are a big, part of my existence. But it's been, since working on this book, it's been a little bit more limited. I mean, Bad Brains are like my go-to in that crossover kind of world. I was lucky enough to open up for HR when he came through here recently too. But yeah, I mean, there's, I enjoy pop music sometimes too, like whatever my kids are listening to or whatever is amazing, like we talk about this crossing, and I don't want to get too far, and I know we're running out of time, but like the crossover stuff with like my kid playing Fortnite, and then like there's an Ariana Grande concert coming up in Fortnite, like that stuff blows my mind that can happen right now. Like that, like whether or not I like Ariana Grande's stuff, that's fine. But, like the fact that there's these crossovers in an event that is coming to a game that's free, that everybody is, like that's crazy to me.
Yeah, that shows how things are changing. That's interesting. Yeah, so I mean, you're quite tapped into modern music or popular music through your kids. Do you try and are they influenced by your music too, or are they like
yeah, whatever. Yeah, the latter. But I really like the modern stuff too, like in coming out of Jamaica. I love Pressure Busspipe and Popcorn, and all kinds of people like Junior Brown and Junior Kelly, both, like all these people that are coming out of Jamaica right now. I work with people down there, producing tracks for them. People out of Orange Street Music, out of Rockers International, Ja Fagan and Mitchie, and a whole bunch of other people that are coming out. I'm just starting to link up with people like Lion of Cambridge Movement, these things that, modern and contemporary artists that are doing, I'm kind of blanking on it because I'm trying to run out of time. Don't want to run out of time here.
I think we're okay. We're gonna.
Oh, okay.
I'll cut us off in a few minutes. It's just
Okay.
sometimes Instagram will cut us off at the hour mark,
Oh,
but
oh, oh,
we're
oh.
looking pretty good at the moment.
Gotcha.
We've run over already, so we can. I mean, while we're still focused on music, though, and with that in mind, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to, or is there, anything else that our listeners might be interested in checking out? Have you heard anything really good recently, other than what you've already mentioned?
I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff coming out right now in the like ska genre that I'm like hugely. I love all the stuff and work with Jump Up Records out of Chicago. But Bad Times Records, putting out tons of good stuff. Catbite is a band that's coming out right now. We Are the Union released a bunch of stuff. Suicide Machine's new record is on Fat Wreck, and it's amazing. Go get it. There's a lot of reggae bands in here and doing, Roots Vibration is another one. The stuff that are local in Detroit here. There's a lot of stuff going on. It amazes me that Jason Mraz is put out a like reggae and ska influenced record, and the people.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's his tour right now has the backing band are all like really good ska musicians and reggae musicians, including Roger Rivas and Kevin Batchelor and a whole bunch of other people. But yeah, I mean, check out the Slackers from New York. There's a lot of New York bands that are coming up. A unfortunate or fortunate name band before time, but it's called the Pandemics. It's another good band. That they were named that way before, but there's a lot of good stuff, and I'm sure I'm dropping lots of stuff, and lots of different, forgetting a lot of things, but there's a lot of stuff out there that you can find just by simple like Spotify or YouTube Spiral. Just go down those things. And then go buy their stuff from Bandcamp.
I was just going to say, and then go buy it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to. I mean, while we're talking about Spotify, for me, Spotify is amazing on one hand because it has truly revolutionized my listening. I've always had a big music collection, and I've always bought lots of music, and it bankrupted me pretty much growing up. And then when I was going through some harder times, and working my way up my career and things, I stopped buying music because I just didn't have that cash. And then about a few years later, then Spotify came along, and it just rejuvenated my love for music, but also it just put me onto so much contemporary stuff. And then some of the algorithms showed me stuff that I'd missed, thinking I've heard every 90s hip hop record from New York, and I find these things and I'm like, what? I never even heard of this. So as a marketing tool, I think can be really good if consumers understand that they still need to support the musicians. And I mean, one of the ways that I will do it is I'll always buy vinyl, especially of say like underground, especially hip hop artists, because it's available still. And then that's different to the digital, the digital Spotify or iTunes, Tidal, whatever we're talking about version. So it's physically different. I love that fact that it's physical as well, and you have it on your shelf, and that kind of lets people know who you are and what you care about and things. And just sitting around putting a record on is very different to hit the algorithm button and just people used to have to listen to a record and turn it over, and it was a different experience. I'm digressing again. I'm a little excited about these things, but obviously there's a nefarious side to it as well in terms of people not getting paid and for emerging artists. But I really urge people to just go on Bandcamp and these other platforms and buy the vinyl if you really like it. But the other thing is go to the gigs, especially when they reopen again, or virtually now, as you've highlighted. I tell you what, my wife is trying to get me. I've had to get rid of a load of clothes as I moved to Brooklyn. Things downsizing from Bristol. But the one thing I won't get rid of is any of my T-shirts and my band T-shirts. And basically every gig I've more or less ever been to, I bought some kind of merch, normally a T-shirt or a hat or something like that. I worked in music for a long time. My sister and my parents all did. So my sister was getting me into loads of free gigs. So I wasn't paying the ticket price. So I was definitely buying at least one T-shirt. So I've got a wardrobe full of every kind of hip hop, jazz, whatever kind of merchandise. So that's another good way to do it, for sure. Do you personally have a lot of merch and stuff that you've collected from concerts?
Oh yeah, if I'm not wearing this kind of stuff, like you already commented on, it's all band stuff and merchandise from tours and other bands, because that's how everybody survives, you know. I mean, the first tours that I went on to, you know, the only way we got gas money was by selling T-shirts, you know, like, and that's it. And if we didn't make it to the next city, right? Like that was it, you know? So like that does, and one record, if you buy one record for $25 or something like that, that's like 1 million streams on Spotify.
I know,
you know, like, so like that, like, it's crazy. And you can buy right from the band. Even, I mean, Bandcamp is great because they take a limited percentage and they're accessible because you can control it yourself from the production side of things. But going out and actually purchasing a record from the people at a show or a CD or whatever, and a shirt, a hat, whatever it is, that guarantees people, the band gets money. Right.
Well, we've just got a really cool comment here from Mug Punk, who says, if you can buy right from the band, you put that love in their hand. I think we've got a rapper on our hands here, maybe. But thanks, Mug Punk. That's a cool comment. And then we've got a bunch of other comments from people talking about, just talking about vinyl and buying stuff, T-shirts and things. And I think it's a really important thing that we need to do, and just to keep supporting new and emerging music.
To tie that back, also support authors.
Oh, touche, yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, like the same, like, to come this back, like buy books from people. Don't just listen to Audible, right? Like, you know, like, go and find like, Audible is great. It's amazing. It's done a lot. The same thing Spotify has to music. But, like, an actual book, holding it in your hands, like, to me, there's nothing like that. Like, you can't fake it.
Well, and I mean, as I work for an independent academic publisher, I obviously want people to support independent academic publishing, because we're often subsidizing research and projects that wouldn't see the light of day otherwise. It's not just Intellect, there's plenty of publishers out there doing that. You know, we work closely with authors and with grants and with different kind of, like, you know, sort of financial providers, just to make interesting, rare and not marketable necessarily projects come off the ground. So definitely do that, and go to brick and mortar bookstores, you know, without naming any names. That's what you really need to do, you know, because, you know, otherwise billionaires are going to be going to space. We're not going to have any bookshops anymore, you know what I mean? So and I think what's nice to see from a publishing perspective here is, after we saw the physical book trade plummet and tank during the pandemic, so far we're now seeing a nice resurgence. So people are going into bookshops and wanting to buy books, having been stuck at home for a year and listening to Audible and ordering off various kind of online retailers and things like that. So I think that's brilliant, and I hope that's a sign of things to come. And I hope it's the same for record stores as well, and that it's not just Urban Outfitters doing, like, Interpol re-releases and things. A lot of more independent music stores, along with independent bookstores, because these are the custodians of culture, if you will, and the people who provide opportunity for us to interact with it. So yeah, everyone go and support the realness, I suppose. That's the gist of it. So last couple of questions. Can you remember what the first record you ever bought was for yourself?
Okay, first vinyl.
Yeah, let's go with vinyl.
I think the first vinyl, if I remember correctly, it was either Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, or Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA.
That's pretty cool.
One of those two. I was in New Jersey during those times, so that did, you know, kind of hit that. But I was given, you know, jazz records and that kind of thing. But the first thing that I actually, like, saved up my money for and went to the record store and got, were probably one of those two. Yeah.
Mine's a little bit embarrassing, actually. Not really. I not really, because I loved it at the time. The first CD I ever bought, which was the first thing I bought for myself, I think, was Always by Bon Jovi.
That's yeah. There
you go. I mean, big up John Bon Jovi, Jersey's finest. But yeah, maybe that wasn't his finest song. But then I did very quickly make up for it by buying on tape Left Field single, and also Sour Times by Portishead. Big up Portishead, band from Bristol, or literally from Portishead round the corner. So that was kind of I redeemed myself slightly there. No offense to John Bon Jovi either. But my mum used to get me better albums than I used to get myself. I remember one Christmas getting Park Life by Blur, and then And then you know, after I was introduced to hip hop via various different people, I must have been 12 or 13 years old. She did get me Wu-Tang, Enter the Wu-Tang. So I mean,
absolutely,
pretty cool from mother there. I'm happy with that. So she was always looking after my musical taste, perhaps more than I was myself.
Yeah.
Similar question: can you remember the first gig you went to?
Yeah, so here's my embarrassment, right? Okay. Yeah, I actually have a vivid, it's the first one in my memory. I'm sure I went to more when I was like a baby or something like that. I don't have any remember. But the first one that I remember was I went to a gig at an outdoor venue here, a huge thing. It was Air Supply.
I don't know who that is even.
Yeah, go ahead. Enjoy yourself.
Okay.
But yeah, I remember going to Air Supply, and then Chuck Mangione's big band was or not Chuck Mangione. No. Oh, who was it? I'm dropping his name. Trumpet player. I forgot it now. It was a large big jazz band at that same thing. Yeah. But Air Supply was yeah, my God. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, that's one for us all to Google after this.
Yeah, you can go right ahead.
I was very lucky when it came to concerts because my mum and dad were they were promoters, so I did go to see lots of pictures of me as a baby, like with all these amazing concerts. But I think the first one I bought my own ticket to was After Bombata, of all things.
Wow, nice, yeah.
And I mean, I think I was probably like 15. I won't say who the venue was because they will get closed down. Definitely an over 18 show. But no, I think that was probably the first ticket I ever bought in a tiny little place. Right. Well, look, we're almost out of time, but when I was doing my research, just checking a few things about you, something kept popping up on Google, and I just thought I'd ask you about it because I found it to be quite interesting.
Okay.
You look worried. No, nothing.
I'm a little.
No, nothing too bad. I'm going to forget the name now, but I've seen a lot of pictures of you on the internet in chef's whites, and it seems like you're a bit of a chef as well. And is that right? You and your brother, is that you?
That is. I am not a chef in any way. No.
Okay.
My brother is a chef, yes. And we did before the pandemic, we had started like kind of an underground dining club here, called Detroit Underground Omakase. And I ran the front of the house and did all the service and that kind of thing and marketing. And then he was the chef in the back of the house.
Excellent. And is that still going on, or
we have not done it since the pandemic happened, and that kind of thing. He's still in the culinary world, and running a culinary school right now. But yeah, I have not been a part of it. That was something that I had stopped bartending and being front of the house when I got tenure. I was like, I'm never doing this again. I like bartending, but I know I'm not doing it. And then I was like, yeah, okay, I'll get back into it a little bit. And, but it was a fun experience. We did I think about 3 years of, once a month, dining, and it was all in the chef's hands. You had no menu, no nothing. And we served about 30 people each time, and it sold out every time. So
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Well, yeah, I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity just to pick that up because it just sounded really cool from all the reviews and things I was reading. So I hope that you guys or your brother is able to sort of relaunch that, or best of luck on any future endeavors. Anyway, whilst I've been working in publishing, I used to also co-own a bar in Bristol, and I've sold my stake in it now. I'm just solely focused on the books, but I used to definitely focus on the beers a bit too, and I do miss being front of house, and I think back in the day as well, I was I did a lot of DJing and working in sort of music as well. So yeah, I think there's something definitely quite captivating and addictive about kind of working in front of people, and I hope we get back to conferences soon because that's the nearest thing I come to it now, standing behind the Intellect booth and talking to people like yourselves. And it's such a great opportunity to meet people. And I'm very glad that we did meet that day at the Public Culture Association, some sub-basement at some dodgy Marriott hotel, probably. I can't remember which one, they all blur into together.
Yeah.
But I'm just really glad that we have your book, which is going to be coming. It's going to be, what is it? I forget. I forgot to Google it. I think it's January, isn't it? I think.
No, I think they schedule it for March.
In March now. Okay, yeah, that's why it's always best to go to the horse's mouth about these things. Yeah. So yeah, I urge everyone to keep an eye out for the Distillation of Sound book. Looking forward to reading it myself as well. Well, Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Do you have any final thoughts or any final words that you would like to leave with our audience?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, you know, I just want to like re-echo, I guess, is support your local community, right? Like that kind of comes down to everything that I like and do. And, you know, like be community-based, not country-based or national. They just like support your neighbor, talk to your neighbor. You know, like go to farmers markets, go to bookstores, go to things that are in your community, because that's how we all thrive, right? Like, and the big chains are all great and easy, but you know, we thrive as people when we read and talk and listen to music and together, you know.
Well, what a lovely final thought. Thank you very much, Eric. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you everyone for joining us here on this week's installment of In Conversation. And do go and check out Abbey Productions and just Google Eric Abbey, and you're going to find a bunch of stuff. And I'm sure there's links and things to the music as well. And of course to the various books and different academic projects that Eric's been working on. So thanks again. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon. And can't wait to publish this book in March next year. So everyone check that out too.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers.